Good evening. Welcome to the Concord Township Board of Trustees meeting for February 19th, 2025. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dondorfer.
Present.
Mr. McIntosh.
Present.
Mrs. Lucci.
Present. Moving on to the approval of minutes.
Madam Chair, I will make a motion to approve the February 5th, 2025 staff meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Madam Chair, I move to approve the February 5th, 2025 regular meeting minutes.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then moving on to elected officials reports. We'll start with our fiscal officer, Mr. John Patriarca.
Thank you, Mrs. Lucci. Short update tonight. First, I just wanted to thank our constituents from Chardon Township who stopped over this evening for our annual joint meeting to discuss a couple of joint projects between our two townships. I thought it went excellent. As always, they do a great job. Looking forward to continuing to work with them throughout the 2025 year and beyond. So that was great as always. I continue to work with Administrator Rose and the department heads to finalize the 2025 budget, which is going great. We anticipate wrapping that up here in the next 30 to 40 days. So that's been going fantastic. And last bit tonight, I do want to congratulate Mr. McIntosh on his appointment by the Lake County Commissioners to the Lakeland Community College Board of Trustees. Certainly will be an asset to that board as he is here at Concord Township. He's done a number of amazing things within not just our township, but the counties, so certainly within the local government fund. So they are lucky to have you. That wraps up my report this evening. If any residents have questions regarding township finances, they can reach out to me directly at my office.
Thank you, Mr. Patriarca. Moving on to our trustees' reports. Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thank you, John, for your kind words. So with that, I will lead that last week I was appointed to be one of the trustees for the Lakeland Community College. That will be effective in March. And unfortunately, I'm going to miss the first meeting, but I already had a few conversations with folks about it. The backstory on me becoming a Lakeland trustee was that I had expressed interest in that before I ran for a trustee here in Concord Township, and Concord got precedence, and I did this, and someone came back and said, "Hey, are you still interested in that?" That's sort of how that went in, and I know there's been some conversation in the community, and please understand that from both sides, the commissioners and myself, thorough diligence was done. So there is no conflict of interest and there is no nefarious intent here. It's just an interest to me to get back to an interest that I'd had like 5 or 6 years ago. So with that, had a couple JED meetings. We've had 3 conversations recently about businesses that are looking to, a business is looking to relocate into Concord Township. There's some zoning issues to address, and we're trying to recruit them into the JED. So we've had a couple of preliminary conversations, and like all of them, they seem like they're in good shape. We'll see how it pairs out. I know that our road department, service department, has been very busy, and we are using a ton of salt. Our crews have been out, so we want to say thank you to them for the hard work of keeping the roads clear this winter. We've had a real winter after a couple of mild ones the last few years. So I did have, in closing, I did have a program, 911 program review committee meeting last week. We're moving forward with we'll be presented with a draft agreement to start deliberating what that infrastructure is going to look like going forward. So with that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. moving to Mr. Dondorfer.
Thank you, Mrs. Lucci. Unfortunately, I was unable to be here at the last meeting, but it was great to attend the Ohio Township Association conference with everybody. We had some good workshops that we attended, brought back some good information I think will benefit the township, so that was always very beneficial. Congratulations, Morgan, on your appointment to the Lakeland Community College Board. You will definitely be an asset there, and I'm sure do quite well like you do here in Concord. We had office hours this evening. We met with our Chardon Township trustees and went over, as Mr. Patriarca said, our joint road project. We had some good dialogue on some projects that are slated for 2025 and 2026. Hoping we can get some of that more accomplished in 25, but we had some good dialogue, so we're hopefully moving that forward. Since the last meeting, I did have a few calls from some residents. A couple regarding some streetlight issues that I know Mr. Rose is moving forward to try to evaluate whether we can get that done. There was a resident over on Ravenna Road that's had a continuing property dispute, some trespassing issues with some other neighbors, and I connected her with some of the people over at the Sheriff's Department. Captain Patterson was facilitating some help to her to try to get that rectified. And other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dondorfer. Well, you guys all said everything I wanted to say, but I will also congratulate, right? I will also congratulate Mr. McIntosh. You're going to provide such meaningful perspective.
Thank you.
All the relationships you've cultivated, you're a perfect appointment. So great job. I also want to thank the service department. Tim was telling me today we used over 4,000 tons of salt.
Yeah.
And I think Morton now is raising prices or rationing salt, so it's been a tough winter. But hopefully we'll have enough to get through the rest of the winter. I did hear from a few residents regarding questions about the noise resolution that's on the agenda today. And as we stated at the last meeting, we are super excited about UH's investment with their oncology services at TriPoint, so we look forward to that. I think that's starting in the spring?
The construction will start this spring.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
so that's great for Concord Township. Aside from that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. So we will move on to department reports with our administrator, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Mrs. Lucci, members of the board, Mr. Patriarca, members of the audience, good evening. I'll start with some items on the agenda. Under old business is Resolution 2025 TAC 05. This is the updated noise resolution that was on first reading at our last meeting. So this is on second reading and is eligible for a vote this evening should you decide to take up the vote. As a reminder, the most significant change is the hours for Sunday, and then we updated some definitions, and this is a limited home rule resolution. Under new business, item B is a vote to consider a memorandum of understanding and MOU between our fire department and the Red Cross. The purpose of the memorandum of understanding is to establish a cooperative relationship between the two parties with respect to installation of smoke alarms and conducting fire safety education in our community. They're working together so that we're not duplicating our effort, we're coordinating and enhancing those two areas. So I encourage approval of that. Item C is a vote to approve a step increase for David Weber, who's in our service department and is due his step increase. Other items, I continue, as Mr. Patriarca mentioned, we are head on working on the 2025 budget. As Mr. McIntosh has mentioned, we've seen an uptick in economic development inquiries in the RD2 light industrial area on Capitol and Discovery. They're encouraging, so there's some activity and people are looking our way. So I'm excited about some potentials that are out there. As Mr. Dondorfer mentioned, I'm working with First Energy on some streetlight issues around the township. Some of those will get resolved rather quickly. Some of those will take a little bit more time as they get engineered on new light requests. We have begun the process of updating software and refreshing the website. We are meeting weekly with Blackbird, who is our website, I think they call it the platform provider, to formulate the changes. It'll create a more enhanced experience when visiting our website. As we get closer and things are more firmed up, we'll be reviewing the changes and a new layout with the trustees to get your review, comments, feedback, and tweaks and so forth before we get too much farther down the road. So that'll be coming up probably at a staff meeting in a month or two. So that'll be coming up. I'm working to finalize the annual reports to the Ohio Department of Development regarding the CRAs and TIFs. Those are annual reports that are due by the end of March. I expect to have those done by the end of this month, get those off the plate. We continue to seek out some grant opportunities. There are some related to fire. There's a new one that Mr. Brown dug out regarding roads and infrastructure. And then I'm also talking with Mr. Supler, our recreation director. He's looking at an LCWF, Land Conservation Water Fund Recreation Grant. So they're under early review in the early stages to determine eligibility and what our share would be, what kind of match we're looking at, and those types of things. So, but it's great that our department heads are out there and they're turning over every rock, looking for grant opportunities and trying to find that funding. Late last week, I met with our docent Dan Maxon. That was a refreshing meeting. He's so excited about the things going on over at the Old Stone School, but he worked out an agreement with I think it was Lake County History Museum, but we are getting some peasware, which was actually manufactured in Concord Township in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And those items will be on display probably by the end of this week. So that's very exciting. So those will be available. And then finally, next coffee with the administrator is tomorrow at 9 over at the community center. So I look forward to chatting with folks and hearing what they have to say. And that's it. That concludes my report. Thank you, ma'am.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rose. Moving on to the audience portion. We have some audience here today. Welcome. Is there someone that would like to come and speak? You can just say your name and your address, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, the lectern, please, sir. That way you get picked up on the...
Gerald Dunlap, 7272 Alexander Road, of course in Concord for my whole life, not always at that address. I'd like to compliment you and your road crew. A little funny story about coming into the township. I knocked on the window up here 2 years ago, and I said I want to talk to the administrator about the road department. Well, he kind of apprehensive when he came out. He thought I was here to complain. They did a great job. I called them up, and like 2 weeks later, they were there, and they cleaned my ditch, and it was great. He said, wow, what a pleasure. I want to mention Leo Scully, too. Part of the reason I'm here is because Leo Scully, the old township trustee, always told me when I was a young man, it's the closest form of government to the people, the township. And that's why I'm here. Now, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I won't have much steam here if this is incorrect. There was an article in the paper, and it's my understanding that there's kind of a consideration of changing the noise ordinance to 10 o'clock on Sundays. Is that true or untrue?
That is it. Go
Let me
ahead.
take that.
Sure.
There is a proposed noise ordinance. It's Resolution 2025 TAC 05 that's up for consideration, and it does change the noise parameters on Sunday morning for domestic power tools, which would be lawnmowers and weed whackers, leaf blowers. It would be 9 a.m. and then construction would not be allowed until 10 a.m.
Okay. Well, I somewhat understand that, but for me, Sundays is the day you get a lot of people get things accomplished. 8 o'clock is the normal business hour for construction people to start up and make noise, jackhammers, heavy equipment, etc. My neighbors, on occasion, their yard care man comes even before 8 o'clock. I don't complain. That's when he gets a chance. Sometimes it's going to rain. You got to get there a little early. You got to get it done. I also believe that a lot of the people that are complaining now about noise, because you didn't do this because there were no complaints, there's probably complaints, is because Concord's changed. We're not so much semi-rural anymore. We're really more city-like. The parameters of building have changed. Neighbors are within a number of feet of your property. I used to live on 110 acres here on Alexander. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I still watch what I do. I try not to annoy my neighbors. Please don't change the hours on Sunday. There's a lot of people that have to get things done. What about the guy who's roofing his house on the weekend and it's a hot summer day? He gets out there and starts banging on the roof. The neighbors are either going to complain no matter what time it is. He shouldn't start until 8 o'clock, but you don't want to wait till 9 or 10 and do it because it's going to be really hot. Anyway, I'm just here to say government is controlling us more and more. If we just end up being good neighbors, pay attention to 8 o'clock, I think things will work out pretty well. So that's why I'm here. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you.
And thanks for getting the ditch taken care of very effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your words.
He made me come.
Okay.
My question is, Andy, where did you get those socks?
I think these were Christmas from the kids, so.
And I guess I'm in a unique position because years ago I asked the township to have a noise ordinance. You might guess with Connie Luda being a libertarian, she was very much against it, as some of the other townships were. But the sheriff's office needed some tools because the judge didn't want us dragging people in there for disorderly conduct. That it's just too broad category. Once in a while, when it's severe enough, that needs to be done, and it is done. I kind of coincide with what his arguments are. We can't expect the two golf courses to wait until the golf course is full of players and cut the grass late in the morning. They like to get started, and there were problems early on, and they accommodated the neighbors. I agree with him. On the weekend, we're controlled by the weather, all of us. It rains 4 days straight. I got to cut the grass sometime, and maybe it's early, and I try not to start my machines ever before 8 o'clock. I think that you have to be careful that it doesn't become too onerous, too heavy a hand on the public. And if I really wanted that kind of control in my life, I'd move into a condo association where they control what color paint I have on my house, what I do when. And another point I have is, in July, we're experiencing 100 degrees by late morning. I don't want to cut the grass at 10 o'clock or run a machine or get the work done. I think the township's a great place to live because it isn't too heavy-handed. There aren't too many rules, regulations, what I got to do. And it does boil down to what he says. If my neighbors are having a party in their yard, I'm not going to run my machinery. It's kind of dependent on the individuals to treat each other well, which for the most part Concord does. One other issue. I know that the Del Webb community on Hoos Road was passed partly on a conservation, green space, new plan. I'm used to the idea that Dale Webb community looks pretty nice over there. But I drive down Hoos Road now and I see 4 lots fronting the road with a 70, 80 foot setback, 80 foot. I pasted off the other day.
Yes, sir.
There's only 30 feet between each house. There isn't enough grass there to feed a couple of rabbits. It certainly can't be a conservation idea there. It certainly can't be an open space idea. The driveway is 80 feet long, basically, and everybody's going to have to back their car onto Hoos Road when they leave, basically, because there's not a turnaround on any one of these. There'll probably be $350,000, $400,000 each, maybe more. It won't, in a way, it won't hurt the value of my home. But I think that the whole concept wasn't conservation or green space, it was maximizing money return. Mr. Reby and I get along pretty good. like a lot of the developments he has, but whoever zoned that, 4 units, all facing the road on Hoos Road with 75-foot driveways, it needs to be looked at. And I'm an old person. I'm used to my open space. I hate to see Concord. It used to be the argument of Concord that it's a little bit rural, it's a little bit country. Well, it ain't very much country anymore, my friends. Thank you for listening to me, and
Thanks.
I appreciate the work you do here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Was that like deja vu?
A little bit. Anyone else that would like to speak?
I don't like to speak, but I do have a question for you, Andy. When you change your ordinances, do you base that on complaints?
It's based on a number of things. I don't change resolutions, I make recommendations. A lot of times those are driven by citizen requests and citizen concerns. And sometimes those concerns go to the trustees, not to me, and they make mention of it, and then I write it up, review it with legal. Legal says it's sound from a format legal standpoint, and then it's presented for consideration. Now, whether it gets taken up or not comes down to the trustees.
And that's what happened here. We heard complaints, so we asked him to look at the 2000 resolution, and some tweaks were made, and it's up for a vote. But that's usually how it goes. It's not Andy just, I'm gonna change this on my own. Yes, yes. Okay, any other questions? All right, then moving on to old business.
So, what's on the agenda is the second reading. Do we complete the second reading and then take an action, or can we just complete the second reading and leave the action open?
You can complete second reading and leave it open. You would have to take an action, have to be an emergency action. I would recommend you complete it and leave it open until such time as the third reading, if that's what you choose to do.
Okay.
Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm asking. I don't, well, yes. So, do we want to have discussion? Do we want to just get the reading out of the way and not vote on it tonight and leave it available for consideration, because we don't have to take action tonight?
Well, we can make some comments before.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I apologize because I wasn't in attendance in the last meeting, so I really haven't had time to fully digest or analyze the new recommendations to the noise resolution. But I know from years ago when Sheriff Dunlap then was involved in the noise resolution and why we reached out to do that through the recommendation of the judge, and I was sort of involved in figuring out those times and those parameters. And like Mrs. Lucci said, a lot of these situations arise where we get complaints, and I similarly with the garbage, it's almost like that situation where we had complaints about a lot of people wanted township-wide garbage, and when we had some dialogue, there was pros and cons on both sides of the table for that, and it was listen. Most people wanted limited government involvement in that type of situation because there were some people that had, certain companies that they wanted, and they didn't want township-wide garbage, and anything in the government should be involved in that. And like Daryl said, township government is the oldest form of government. It's probably closest to where you're at with your citizens. And I'm not sure I'm there yet on this noise resolution, because I really haven't had time to digest it completely. And weigh the pros and the cons, but I see the different points.
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy, or to compare it to the conversation about having a single hauler trash. I mean, there's a section of people that want it, and there may be some of the newer. Well, I came from somewhere and it was cheaper, and it's more expensive here, and and we've stated before on the record the advantages we've gotten. And we have, I think, we have a changing community. We have folks that come from different places. I know with respect to, one of the complaints that I fielded was new home construction on a cool Sunday morning, right at 8 o'clock sharp, banging on, making a big ruckus in one of the newer developments in the community. And somebody sent me a video and I had a recording of it. It was, and I went online and looked at it and said, nope, there's nothing that stops that. So I have not heard the objections raised this evening are the first objections that I've had. So I certainly think I'm interested to sort of weigh that feedback against the complaint that I have and some of the conversation. It's always a fine line. And I think about that every time we pass legislation like this, when we, discuss the trash hauler, the fact that this is a township. And it's interesting how many times you tell people, well, can the city this? And you politely remind them that it's a township. But boy, when you want to put regulation in, the people that know they live in a township sure remind you that they live in a township and that they know that. Yeah. So I appreciate the fresh reminder about the fact that this isn't a city and it's a township. And I definitely am prepared to give this some due consideration considering the feedback tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate Sheriff saying that you wanted some guidelines. The sheriff office wanted some guidelines back in 2000 when this was first put into place. So it did give, I think, residents and the sheriff some guidelines in terms of enforcement and, going to people's house if there was an issue. I very much appreciate what you said about summertime and, Sundays, usually when the sun's up, I'm ready to go and I want something to do. So I appreciate your words on making sure that you avoid the sun and you can get your work done timely. Businesses have sometimes Sundays the only day they can work because of the weather. So I appreciate all those discussion points. So if we wish to
Table.
we just table. No motion, correct?
Well, I think it's always proper to do it by motion.
Okay.
Okay.
I will then make a motion to table resolution 2025-05 noise resolution for a third reading.
Well, you would just
Table
table
the
it,
second
and then
reading.
when you decide to
Table the
take it off the
second,
table, you can.
Okay.
You may never take it off the table.
Okay. All right. Well, I make a motion to table it.
All right, and I'll second.
So all in favor of tabling the noise resolution second reading?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Dines. Moving on to new business.
Madam Chair, move to approve the January financial report.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair, I will make a motion to approve the 3-year MOU between the Northern Ohio region of the American Red Cross and Concord Township, acting through its fire department and conducting smoke alarm installations and fire safety education in the community, and for the trustees to authorize Fire Chief Sabo as executor of the MOU.
And I will second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair, I move to approve Service Department step increase for David Weber to Operator 1, $27.11 an hour, effective February 24th, 2025.
And I will second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item D are items voted on at the February 5th, 2025 staff meeting. The vote there was a motion to enter into executive session to discuss imminent litigation related to zoning violations pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22G3, and to have Mr. Patriarca and Mrs. Freeman join the executive session. At 4:55 p.m., Mr. McIntosh made a motion to enter the executive session to discuss imminent litigation related to zoning violations pursuant to ORC 121.22G3, and to have Mrs. Freeman, Ms. Matheny, and Mr. Patriarca join the executive session. Mrs. Lucci seconded. Roll call vote. Mr. McIntosh, yes. Mrs. Lucci, yes. At 5:17, Mr. McIntosh moved to exit out of executive session. Mrs. Lucci seconded, and the vote were 2 ayes. Moving on to future meetings and announcements. Mr. Patriarca.
On March 3rd at 3 p.m., staff meeting at Town Hall. March 4th at 7 p.m., there will be a zoning commission meeting here at Town Hall. And on March 5th from 5 to 6 p.m., trustee office hours here in the conference room, followed by at 6 p.m., the trustee meeting at Town Hall.
Thank you very much. That will conclude our meeting for this evening.
One more point.
Sure.
as you're doing your business, I'm thinking, when I read it in the paper, it just wasn't a big deal, the 10 a.m. thing. And that's how it is for most people. The deputy who goes to the call to tell people they're violating the 10 o'clock thing, he's the one or she who's gonna hear what a crappy idea this is. Okay, then I know it's adjourned, you're done for business, but you won't hear about it, the deputy will. And it was like no big deal when I read it. He called me and said, you ought to go to the meeting. So I'm blaming him.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
All right, good evening, everyone. I did talk to Bob.